I'll be discussing about one of the important topics, that is ovulation induction. Every day in your OPDs, you will be seeing so many infertile couples who have not taken any treatment. So simple, proper ovulation induction will make them conceive. So I will be discussing about the medications which are required for ovulation induction and different protocols for IUI. So here we'll be discussing about IUI, the response to the controlled ovarian stimulation, what are the protocols, and comparison between different protocols and luteal phase deficiencies. So coming to overview of IUI. So it is an assisted conception technique involving the deposition of processed semen sample in the upper uterine cavity, overcoming the natural barriers to the sperm ascent in the female reproductive tract. The process is independent of the ovulation status of the women. The IUI increases the rate of conception. It improves the sperm quality and concentration at the site of fertilization, transports the maximum number of healthy sperms to the site of fertilization. Coming to the rationale of IUI, the rationale is that it increases the density of both egg and sperms near the site of fertilization, which will increase the likelihood of pregnancy. That is right sperm in the right place at the right time. So coming to the advantage of IUI, it is simple and non-invasive techniques. It is cost effective and also reasonable success rate with 3 to 4 IUI cycles. It is safe and requires minimal monitoring compared to IVF, and also low dropout rates because the cost is less, and also the number of visits are less compared to IVF, and also the risk of OHSS is less. Coming to the indications of IUI, in female factors, mainly those who have ovulatory dysfunction. The others are endometriosis, which is minimal and mild, and in cervical factor like cervical mucous hostility, cervical infection, and in male, mild male fertility, ejaculatory failures like anatomical hypospadiasis, neurological spinal cord injuries, retrograde ejaculations, and psychological, especially impotence. The other indications are unexplained infertility, HIV discordant couples. They are considered while waiting for IVF or in women with patent tubes when IVF is not affordable. Coming to the indication of artificial insemination with donor sperms, one is like gross male fertility. That is, if they have azoospermia, severe oligoasthenoteratozoospermia, and failed fertilization with ICSI. The other indication is HIV discordant couple, where husband is positive or his CD4 count is abnormal or he is having active infection. The other is familial genetic disease, severe Rh incompatibility, and also single women or a lesbian couple. Coming to the contraindications, when we should not do IUI, whenever there is a damaged tubes or if there is any blockage of the fallopian tube. Suppose if the fallopian tube one side is blocked, if the other side is open, so we can do IUI only when the follicle develops on the other side of the ovary where the fallopian tube is open. The other indication where we should not do IUI is pelvic endometriosis stage 3 and above. If there is any peritubal adhesions, if there is a severe male factor infertility, like if the sperm count is only 1 million, 2 million, genital tract infection, cervical atresia, because negotiating the catheter will be difficult if there is a cervical atresia, and also unexplained uterine bleeding. Coming to ovulation induction, why we have to do ovulation induction? To develop the follicles in the anovulatory cycles as in PCO, or in a hypogonadotropic hypogonadism patients, or in superovulation in a normal patient. It can be natural cycle IUI and or using clomiphene citrate or tamoxifen, like other drugs like aromatase inhibitor, letrozole or anastrozole. And also we can use gonadotropins alone or in combination with oral medications. Coming to natural cycle IUI, here monitoring of TVS for follicular, here we monitor the follicular growth by transvaginal scan. Once the mature, we will not give any medications or injections, only plain folic acid will be given. Once a mature size follicle is obtained, like 18 to 24 mm, and once the endometrium pattern is very good, if it is around 9 mm, if it is a triple line endometrium is obtained, monitor the urinary LH every 4 to 5 hours. It is very difficult to monitor that urinary LH search. And also depending upon the search, we can plan the IUI. between 36 to 40 hours from the LH surge and will be repeated within 12 hours if the oocyte is not yet released. So one thing what we do, the modification compared to this natural cycle IUI is, instead of monitoring the LH regularly, once the follicle is around 18 to 24 and the endometrium is good, we give HCG trigger, either like urinary HCG 5000, then plan the IUI between 36 to 40 hours and after confirming the follicular rupture. Coming to optimum ovarian stimulation for IUI. So we need 1 or 2 follicles measuring 18 to 19 and the E2 value should be around 150 to 250 picogram per ml for a mature follicle. That is, a follicle more than 15 will secrete around 150 to 250. E2 should not be more than 1500. If it is more, means many follicles are developing. And also ideally the endometrium, if it is more than, ideally it should be like around 9 If it is around 8 to 10 also, it is good. And also the pattern should be very good, like a triple line pattern with a good flow. And also like if we do IUI between day 13 to day 16, the success rate will be more compared to doing IUI early. If the follicle recruitment occurs early or if it occurs late, slightly, the success rate will be less. So cancellations is like when the E2 value is more than 1500, or if you get more than 6 follicles of more than 15 ideally we cancel the cycle if more than 3 follicles are there more than 15 size. Coming to the medications which are used, most commonly used is clomiphene citrate. It is a non-steroidal triphenyl chloroethylene derivative. Structurally, it is similar to estradiol. It facilitates the binding to estrogen receptor in the hypothalamus and decreases the negative feedback of estrogen. So it increases GnRH. GnRH leads to increased pituitary gonadotropin secretion, which in turn leads to follicular growth. It has an anti-estrogenic effect on the endometrium and cervix. That is the main disadvantage. Available as 50 to 100, 50 and 100 milligram tablet. So it is ineffective in hypo group 1, WHO group 1 patients. It is given orally started from day 2 or day 3 of cycle after spontaneous or progesterone induced menses. Dose is 50 to 150 milligram, maximum is 250, but usually we give up to 150 only. So results are like the ovulation induction is achieved in 70 to 80% of cases, and the cycle fecundity is around 15 to 22%. Cumulative pregnancy is around 70 to 75% over 6 to 9 cycles, and also multiple pregnancy is around 5 to 8%. Majority are twins. If no pregnancy is achieved in 3 to 6 cycles of clomiphene citrate induced ovulation, always evaluate for the other associated causes or change the treatment strategy. Coming to the side effects, a few patients may experience vasomotor flushes in 10% of the cases. Few may have abdominal distension, bloating, pain, breast discomfort, nausea, vomiting, and also headache. If there is any visual disturbances, the CC has to be discontinued. The recent studies have shown there is a decrease in uterine blood flow and reduced endometrial implantation. And the direct effect of clomiphene citrate on oocyte fertilization, implantation, and embryogenesis is there. So they have to evaluate by larger studies. And also supraphysiological E2 is detrimental to the implantation. And also in some cases, it can cause luteal phase defect because of its negative impact on endometrium and the cervix. Coming to the CC resistance, that is ovulation failure. It is like failure to ovulate with 3 months usage of CC up to 150 milligram per day. So some recommend up to 250, but ideally stick to 150 only for 5 days. So most common causes PCO. It occurs in 20 to 30% of patients. Second terminology what we use is CC failure, that is conception failure. So here patient who ovulate but fail to conceive. Here ovulation is happening, but the pregnancy will not happen. It may be because of anti-estrogenic effect. How we can overcome the resistance with clomiphene citrate, or if we have repeated failures, how to overcome all these things. One is if the patient is obese, ask her to for weight loss. And also we can do the pre-treatment with OCPs or estrogen. So prolonged usage of CC for 7 to 10 days, and also increase the dose of clomiphene citrate if the ovulation is not happening. If you are using 50, next time try to use 100 or 150. and also sequential treatment with clomiphene citrate with gonadotropins, and also other adjuvants we can use, like in a PCO patient we can use metformin and acetols, and we can go for ovarian drilling. Metformin with clomiphene citrate achieves ovulation in 4 to 9, it is like 4 to 9 times more often than CC alone. And also few recommend treatment with glucocorticoids like dexamethasone 0.5 mg or prednisolone 5 mg. We can give low dose aspirin whenever the endometrium is thin. We can give estrogen supplementation, aspirin to improve the endometrial blood flow, and also sildenafil to increase the endometrial blood flow. Coming to the second category of drug, that is tamoxifen. It is a selective estrogen receptor modulator. It is also triphenyl ethylene like a CC. It has an anti-estrogenic effect on the breast, used in the treatment of CA breast, and is estrogenic in endometrium. It causes, whenever the patient has thin endometrium, it is the drug of choice for ovulation induction, but it can cause endometrial hyperplasia. The dose is 40 milligram per day for 5 days, starting from day 2 to day 3. So ovulation rate as well as pregnancy rates in tamoxifen and CC for ovulation induction are similar according to the study. And also some prefer, like some say tamoxifen is superior to clomiphene, as it doesn't have any adverse endometrial effect. And also in few studies they have noted tamoxifen is effective even in clomiphene citrate resistant cases. Coming to aromatase inhibitor, the third category of drugs. Here it is a competitive inhibitor of aromatase enzyme. It inhibits the conversion of androgens to estrogen. So the negative feedback, it reduces the negative feedback effect and increases the gonadotropin, especially FSH, from the pituitary and helps in follicular growth. The increased follicular sensitivity to the FSH, and also it increases the follicular sensitivity to the FSH, even if the FSH concentration is normal or slightly less also. Since the sensitivity is increased, even the low concentration or normal concentration of FSH helps in the development of the follicle. It is mainly because of intrafollicular accumulation of androgens. Because of the accumulation of the androgens inside the follicles, the sensitivity to the FSH is also increased. The androgen increases the FSH receptor expression in the follicle also. This was noted in the recent studies. In a PCO patient, there is increased FSH release. It lowers the E2 and also monofollicular response, and also it increases the endometrial thickness and reduces the multiple pregnancy rate compared to clomiphene citrate. So there are first two generations of the medications were developed. They had lot of allergic reactions and most side effects. So the third generation with the most purified form of the medications came, that is letrozole and esterozole. So letrozole is most commonly used. The mean half-life is 45 hours. So starting dose is 2.5. We can give up to 7.5 milligram daily, starting from day 2 to day 5 for 5 days. So the side effects are like hot flushes, nausea, vomiting, headache, leg cramps, mainly on long-term usage. So what are the advantages? One is it improves the endometrial thickness, it improves the cervical mucus, helps in monofollicular response as well as better folliculogenesis. As a result, it increases the pregnancy rate and higher chances of singleton pregnancy. So letrozole can be first choice in ovulation induction in women with PCO and CC resistant, and also most commonly used drug for IUI as well as mild stimulation for IVF and ICSI. So coming to the protocols, one is like with the letros, we have step-up protocol. Here, there is no depletion of the estrogen receptor throughout the body. And also like it has a short acting life compared to CC, 45 minutes half-life, and it keeps the hypothalamic pituitary axis intact compared to CC. So what are the and also like it is a novel protocol for multifollicular development that results in a higher clinical pregnancy rate per treatment cycles. So that is step-up protocol. What they follow is on day 2, they'll give 1 tablet. On day 3, they will give 2 tablets. On third day, 3. On fourth day, 3 tablets. On the fifth day, like 4 tablets. Like that, they will increase the dose daily by 2.5 mg. Maximum, they will give us like 4 tablets per day. So by giving this, it extends the FSH window by prolonging the suppression of estrogen level. It prevents the rising estrogen from suppressing the endogenous FSH. It controls the breakthrough estrogen production due to proliferation of granulosa cells. It increases the duration of elevated FSH, resulting in multifollicular development. So extended Letrose protocol, one more is like extended Letrose protocol. Instead of 5 days, we can give up to 7 to 10 days. So Letrose 2.5 mg daily starting from day 1 or day 2 of the spontaneous or progesterone-induced menstrual cycle for 10 days is given. So some give for 7 days, some can extend up to 10 days. So it results in more mature follicle and pregnancy rate is more. There is no increase in number of twin pregnancy, and also there is no risk of OHSS according to the data which is available. So now coming to use of gonadotropins. Gonadotropins, these are the injections such as HMG and FSH are used as an alternative for controlled ovarian stimulation. The advantages, it is highly responsive and effective. The disadvantages, the cost is more, so it is expensive, and also multifollicular development can happen, which results in OHSS, and also high order multiple pregnancy. A combination of clomiphene and gonadotropin can be a cost effective option for controlled ovarian stimulation, or we can use Letrose with gonadotropin. Coming to the gonadotropins, there are different preparations which are available. One is HMG. So human menopausal gonadotropin, which is most commonly used for ovulation induction in timed intercourse cycles as well as IUI. So each 75 units contains equal quantity of FSH and LH, and it also has a urinary proteins. So the second generation, that is highly purified HMG, has come. So here it contains each 75 unit of HMG contains 75 international units of FSH, 75 international units of LH, and the urinary protein is less than 5%. Whereas in the first preparation, it was like 95% of urinary proteins. Because of urinary proteins, the allergic reactions and all were more. So highly purified HMGs, the urinary proteins is less than 5%. The other injections which can be used, which is cost effective, is urinary FSH. The other is highly purified urinary FSH. In a highly purified urinary FSH, because of the high purification methods, the urinary proteins are less. So less allergic reactions, and the response will be good and uniform. And the other fifth category of the drug which we can use is recombinant FSH and recombinant LH. These are synthesized by recombinant technology. They are the purest form of injections, and also the response will be very good. Only thing is the cost is more compared to highly purified injections. So the dose of the gonadotropins, it depends upon the patient BMI, patient age, and their AMH value, and also the dose which was used in previous cycle. Suppose in the previous cycle, if you have used 37.5 and the response was not there, then we can use 75 in this cycle. Suppose if the ovulation induction done outside, if they have given 75 units and the patient has hyper responded, that indicates we should not give 75. We have to start with lower dose than 75. And also if the patient AMH is more, try to start with low dose, that is 37.5. And also in young patient, we give low dose of injection. And also in a low BMI patient, we give low dose of injection. And also the dose depends upon the cause of infertility also. It is indicated in hypogonadotropic hypogonadism WHO 1 category, and in clomiphene resistant ovulation and ovulations, unexplained infertility, and also in a older women where you want more eggs, or if they are not responding for the medications, then we have to do this, use this gonadotropins. So what does the recent study say? They say like compared to HMG versus highly purified FSH, the HMG is more effective compared to highly purified FSH because it significantly increases E2 and higher LH level, increase in progesterone and testosterone. It decreases the treatment duration and dose of gonadotropins. And also LH interaction with theca cells, more androgen and estrogens are synthesized. And also direct action on granulosa cells, it increases aromatase activity and increases estrogen secretion. And also by giving HMG, what is the other advantages? So whatever the small follicles are developing, they'll regress, they won't grow fast. So another study comparing the highly purified FSH versus recombinant FSH, the pregnancy rates are more with recombinant injections, and also more mature follicles are obtained in recombinant injections. So more dose, like less dose with less days of stimulation in recombinant injections. So coming to the gonadotropin stimulation regimes. So one is chronic low dose step up regime, which is most commonly used. The others are step down regime, and other is sequential protocol. Coming to conventional regime, like gonadotropins are started from 75 to 150 international units daily. Starting from day 2 or day 3, continue the same dose, or you can increase depending upon the response. If the response is less, you can increase. Continue the gonadotropin dose till the follicle is more than 16 or till you give the HCG trigger. So another is conventional step-up protocol. Here in conventional, starting dose may be 150 starting from day 3, continued up to day 7. And then if the follicle is more than 12 continue the same dose. Or if the follicle response is very slow, then we may have to increase the dose. The other what we follow most commonly is chronic low dose step-up protocol. So once they come on day 3, start with low dose. 75 international units of FSH is given for 7 days. If severe PCO patient, if they have hyper responded, even we can start with 37.5. But whatever the major protocol the study was done, they started with 75 international units of FSH. Give for 7 days starting from day 3. After giving for 7 days, call the patient for scan. Check for the follicular growth. If the follicular growth is less than 10 in size, maintain the same dose of injection for 7 days. So after 7 days, check for the follicular scan again. Even if the follicles are less than 10 increase the dose by 37.5 per day for 7 more days. So after giving for 7 days, suppose if the follicular growth is not increased, again you can increase by 37.5. Maximum we can give in that cycle is 225. So suppose in spite of giving 225 international units, if the follicle is not growing, then cancel the cycle, start the new cycle by increasing the dose of gonadotropin. Suppose if you have started with 75, add 37.5. So start with 112.5 in the next cycle. Suppose by giving for 7 days, if there is no response, you have given for another 7 days. So after giving for 14 days, if the follicle size is more than 10 maintain the same dose, do the follicular monitoring and continue. So in the third scenario, if after giving for 7 days, if the follicular growth is good, maintain the same dose of the follicular growth. So maintain the same dose until follicle is more than 18 and give the HCG injection. So slight modification in this protocol we can do we can start with 37.5 international units, give it for 14 days. This is a grammatical representation. Sometimes the patient who are working may not agree for like regular monitoring, like we have to increase for another 7 days and then wait for 7 days, then monitor. It takes long time. So in that case, we can slightly shorten the duration, give it for 5 days, observe if there is no increase the dose by 25 to 37.5. Again in 5 days, if there is no growth, we can increase. Slight modifications can be done. So the advantage of this protocol is higher rates of monofollicular ovulation, lesser multiple pregnancy, lesser OHSS, and good pregnancy rate. The disadvantage is long duration of treatment. So the maximum dose is 225 international units per day. If there is no response in the second cycle, start with a higher dose. The results of this protocol is it results in mono-ovulatory cycles in 70% of the cases. Pregnancy rate is around 20% per cycle, and OHS incidence is very less, that is 0.14%. Multiple pregnancy rate is around 6%, and it is a safe and effective protocol. The other protocol which is starting with high dose and then reducing the dose. This is called as low dose step. So this is called as low dose step down protocol. The heading is there is a little bit mistake here. We start with higher dose, so of 150. So give it for initial 5 to 7 days and see the response. If the response is good, then start reducing the gonadotropins slowly. So the advantage of one is it reduces the treatment duration of the treatment, and also the disadvantages requires stringent follicular monitoring, because since we are starting with more dose of injections here, so the amount of more follicle might develop and more incidence of OHSS will be there. So that has to be checked. So monitoring of gonadotropin therapy. So why monitoring is required? One is serum estradiol we have to monitor. So a follicle less than 10 usually it won't secrete much of estrogen. So just prior to the LH surge, usually a good follicle secretes around 200 to 400 picogram per ml. and each dominant is follicle is expected to produce 150 to 300 picogram per ml. The pregnancy is uncommon in less than 200 picogram per ml if the secretion is less. And another important thing is when you are using gonadotropins, always do a baseline scan and check for the follicular size, its thickness, how many follicles are developing. So coming to the HCG, like surrogate LH, that is for the ovulation, the medication which we give. We can give HCG injection, that is 5,000 to 10,000 can be used, or we can use a GnRH agonist trigger, that is most commonly we use Lupride injections. There is no, if there is no evidence of ovulation with the Lupride injection, we can repeat one more dose of injections. So when we can give the trigger for the follicular rupture, in a natural cycle, ideal between 20 to 22. If you are using CC or Letrose, between 18 to 19. So in CC plus HMG, it is 19 to 21. So if you are using injections, you can trigger around 18 mm when the follicle size is around 18 mm. So in a natural cycle, we can wait up to 20 to 22. What are the advantage of oral drugs over gonadotropins? One is better patient compliance, lesser chances of OHSs, lower rate of multiple pregnancy, low cost and lesser need for cycle monitoring. So one more is we have a sequential protocol, that is like, initially we have to step up, like we start with low dose, increase the dose. Once the follicle development happens, then we can reduce the dose. Usually we don't follow this. Usually we go for chronic low dose step up protocol only. Coming to role of metformin. So it is most commonly used in PCO patients, CC resistant PCOS, and in ART. So it improves the ovulation rate compared to placebo. Coming to different comparison of different protocol, when we compare letrozole versus clomiphene citrate in ovulation induction in IUI, no statistical differences for clinical pregnancy rate per cycle, cumulative pregnancy rate, miscarriage of live birth rate. So the letrozole and CC are equally effective, and letrose does not offer any additional benefit over the CC. Comparing low dose HMG versus CC in IUI. Ovarian stimulation with low dose HMG is superior to clomiphene citrate in IUI cycles because it has a higher clinical pregnancy rate, higher live birth rate, low and comparable multiple live birth rates, lower number of pre-ovulatory follicles, increased endometrial thickness, and lower cancellation rates. So if we compare letrose, gonadotropin versus clomiphene citrate for unexplained infertility, so the highest clinical pregnancy rate as well as live birth rate is obtained with gonadotropins. The pregnancy rates with letrose were significantly lower than rates with standard therapy or gonadotropin alone, but not with clomiphene alone. So letrose resulted in significantly lower frequency of multiple gestation. That is, with letrozole, the monofollicular response was more, so singleton pregnancies were more. So effect of combination of stimulants in IUI, one is with letrose and HMG, there was improved follicular growth, increased thickness in endometrium, and increased live birth rate. When compared to CC with HMG, and also there is, when we compared CC with HMG, higher number of follicles were obtained and higher pregnancy rates. A combination approach could be preferred ovarian stimulation protocol in couples with unexplained infertility. So coming to the Cochrane review, so they say clomiphene citrate, it is cost effective, but less effective when compared to gonadotropins. They do not prevent multiple pregnancy. It has an anti-estrogenic effect. Clomiphene citrate should be used for maximum 12 months in patient's lifetime and for maximum of 6 months consequently. Coming to gonadotropins, these are most effective drugs for IUI. Low dose protocols are advised. Pregnancy rates do not seem to differ significantly from pregnancy rate with high dose regimens, whereas the risk of multiple pregnancy and OHSS is raised with high dose. GnRH agonist, there is no role in IUI. It increases the cost. It increases multiple pregnancy without increasing the probability of conception. For stimulation, GnRH agonist, we don't use much common, but as an ovulation trigger, we can use it whenever more follicles are there in PCO or in a PCO patient. Comparing urinary gonadotropins versus recombinant, no significant difference was noted in IUI cycles. And GnRH antagonist, whether or not going to play a role in mild ovarian hyperstimulation or IUI program needs to be determined in future trials. Coming to risk factors for ovarian hyperstimulation syndromes, one is primary risk factor, that is most commonly in engage, history of elevated response to gonadotropins, previous OHSS, and polycystic ovaries. The secondary risk factors are absolute increased serum E2 level, the follicular size and number. Suppose if more follicles are developing, and also the number of oocyte collected. This is important in the IVF cycles. So what are the factors which are responsible for success in controlled ovarian stimulation? One is maternal age, duration of infertility, diagnosis, protocol, and the number of previous treatment cycles, and semen parameters and preparation techniques, and timing of IUI. So these things, the tips and tricks to improve the IUI success rate will be discussed in the next session. So these are the key messages. One is IUI increases the rate of conception by improving the sperm quality and concentration, and by transporting the maximum number of healthy sperms to the site of fertilization. IUI has a good couple compliance and very low risk of complication like OHSS. Doctor prefers IUI combined with COS because of higher pregnancy rate compared to IUI. And also ovarian induction alters the luteal phase and creates a suboptimal environment. So that has to be like taken care. Adequate luteal support has to be given. Thank you all.